Salzburg is a pretty little town in the Austrian Alps. Here on a summer evening long ago, Marianne Mozart sat playing the harpsichord. Her brother Wolfgang, perched on a stool in the corner, listened intently. Finally, the little fellow got up and went over to the harpsichord. "Marianne, such a lovely melody is running through my head. Let me play it for you." "But how can you, Wolfgang? You've never had a lesson." "Oh, please let me try." Wolfgang put his hands on the keys. He could barely reach them. Marianne could scarcely believe her ears. "Father, Mother, come here, listen to Wolfgang play. He's learned all by himself." Their parents came running into the room. When Leopold Mozart heard what his little boy had done, he caught Wolfgang in his arms and said, "Well, you've learned the melody. Now I'll teach you how to add the harmony." Leopold was a violinist at the court of Salzburg. He immediately began to teach Wolfgang the elements of music. Before long, Wolfgang had composed his first minuet. He made such rapid progress that he soon had a number of compositions to his credit. The fame of the wonder child spread through Salzburg. One day, Leopold proudly announced, "Wolfgang, guess what? We're going to Vienna, and you will play before the Empress." There was much excitement in the household. Finally, they were ready for the journey. Wolfgang and his father got into a huge coach, and off they went. Vienna was an exciting place. Wolfgang had never seen such tall houses. The avenues were filled with carriages. When they had rested from their journey, they set out for the palace of the Empress Maria Theresa. They were ushered into a magnificent hall painted gold and white. The Empress was surrounded by her courtiers and ladies. A tall footman in scarlet livery announced in a loud voice, "Leopold Mozart of Salzburg and his son Wolfgang Amadeus." Leopold bowed low before Maria Theresa and kissed her hand. He had instructed his son to do the same. But when Wolfgang saw that the Empress was a pleasant, motherly woman with a kind face, he went right up to her, put his arms around her neck, and kissed her. The Empress smiled. "How old are you, my child?" "I'm 6, Your Majesty. May I play for you?" "I'm most eager to hear you," said the Empress. "What will you play?" "A piece I wrote specially for you." Wolfgang went to the harpsichord. Before he began, he turned to Maria Theresa. "It's a minuet," he said, "so I wrote it in 3/4 time." Everybody applauded at the end of the minuet. The Empress looked extremely pleased. "Is there anything else you would like to play?" she asked. "Yes, Your Majesty. A piece I composed the day before we left Salzburg. It goes fast. That's why I call it Allegro." When he finished playing, Wolfgang returned to the Empress. She took him in her lap and kissed him. Then she said, You will be a great composer when you grow up, Wolfgang. Austria will be proud of you. She called over her little daughter, the Princess Marie Antoinette, and the two children spent a happy hour sliding across the smooth yellow floors of the imperial palace. Leopold Mozart was eager that all Europe should recognize the genius of his wonderful son. He set out with his family on a long journey that took them to the court of Louis XV at Versailles. Then they traveled to London, where Wolfgang played before King George III. He enchanted everyone who heard him and was hailed as the wonder boy of music. At last they returned to Salzburg. Wolfgang settled down to compose. By the time he was 13, he had written sonatas, concertos, symphonies, religious works, and operas. Although he composed with miraculous ease, he worked hard until he had perfected himself in every branch of his art. In those days, an artist was attached to the court of a nobleman and served his patron by producing works for the use of the court. Wolfgang wrote many compositions for his patron, the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg. Some of these were light-hearted pieces known as Divertimenti, which were intended mainly to entertain the aristocratic guests of the Archbishop. At this time, the harpsichord lost its popularity and was supplanted by the piano. The piano was a more expressive instrument than the harpsichord, for it could play both soft and loud. It could make a crescendo and diminuendo. Wolfgang wrote some of his most enchanting melodies for the piano. Wolfgang often appeared at court as a pianist. For these occasions, he wrote concertos for piano and orchestra. He established the piano concerto as an important form of music. Wolfgang's piano concertos enabled him to display his mastery of piano technique. He included not only lovely melodies, but also brilliant scale passages and arpeggios. The old archbishop, who was a true lover of music, died. His successor, Count von Colloredo, treated the court musicians as little better than servants. Wolfgang was a high-spirited youth. He hated to be ordered about by his patron. He regarded himself as an artist and resented it bitterly when, at the archbishop's table, he was forced to eat with the valet and the cook. He grew more and more restless and dissatisfied with his position at Salzburg. Finally, he could bear his servitude no longer. He quarreled with the archbishop and, after a violent scene, was dismissed. Wolfgang had no regrets at all. At last he was free to break away from Salzburg. When Leopold heard what had happened, he was horrified. "Go back to the archbishop," he advised Wolfgang, "and ask his forgiveness." "Never. I hate him almost to fury." "Do not fear, father. I will make my way in Vienna." "But you don't know how to get on in the world, Wolfgang. As long as you stay in Salzburg, I can watch over you." "Father, I'm grown up now, and I have to lead my own life." Leopold's heart was heavy within him, but he managed a smile. "God be with you, my son. Let's hope for the best." Wolfgang had a special reason for wanting to be in Vienna. The girl he loved was there. Constanze Weber was young and pretty, and she loved him in return. Unfortunately, Leopold disapproved of the match because Constanze was poor. How would the young couple live, he asked, if Constanze had no dowry and Wolfgang had no steady job. But Wolfgang was not afraid. He married Constanze. They set up house in Vienna. Wolfgang's joy knew no bounds. He had faith in his genius and was sure that he would succeed. In time, a son was born to Mozart and Constanze. Their happiness was made complete when Leopold forgave them for having married against his wishes and came from Salzburg to visit them. What gay evenings they spent together, making music with their friends. One night, the famous composer Joseph Haydn joined them. They spent the evening playing Mozart's new string quartets. When they finished, Haydn turned to Leopold and cried enthusiastically, "I swear to you on my honor that your son is the greatest composer I know." Leopold flushed with pleasure at these words. His careful training of his son had borne rich fruit. He went back to Salzburg with his heart at rest. Although they did not know it, father and son were never to meet again, for Leopold died a short time later. In Vienna, Mozart met the court poet Lorenzo da Ponte. They became friends and decided to write an opera together. Da Ponte based his libretto on a popular French comedy in which Figaro, a man of the people, outwitted the nobleman Count Almaviva. Thus came into being one of the most beautiful of all operas, The Marriage of Figaro. Mozart played his opera before the Emperor Joseph, the son of Maria Theresa. The emperor was delighted and ordered The Marriage of Figaro to be produced at once. How proud Mozart felt as he conducted the gay overture. To his horror, after the curtain rose, everything went wrong. The singers sang off pitch and acted as if they hardly knew their parts. Mozart did not know that he had powerful enemies at court who were jealous of his talent and wanted him to fail. They had instructed the singers to ruin his opera. At the end of the first act, Mozart hurried to the Emperor's box. "Your Majesty, everything is going badly tonight." But the Emperor had already guessed the truth. "Don't worry, Mozart." He sent word to the singers that if they did not immediately do their best, they would all be dismissed from his service. From that moment on, things went well, and the Marriage of Figaro won a triumphant success. Although the Emperor knew how gifted Mozart was, he did not give him a permanent position at court. Again and again, Mozart was passed over in favor of less talented men. As time went on, Mozart found it more and more difficult to make ends meet. He was always in debt, always hoping that something would turn up to free him from want. In his letters, he describes himself as hovering continually between hope and anxiety. "If only I had 600 gulden," he writes, "I would be able to compose with a fairly easy mind. Ah, I must have peace of mind. At the same time, he was moving away from the kind of music that seeks only to entertain. He was finding his way to a more expressive style than the lords and ladies of the court were accustomed to. One publisher advised him to write in a more popular style. In that case, Mozart replied, I can make no more money by my pen. I had better starve and die at once. As the disappointments piled up, Mozart's former gaiety and love of life began to desert him. He traveled to various cities, hoping to improve his position, but he always returned empty-handed. A note of defeat crept into the letters he wrote Constanza. He seemed to be realizing that fate had decided against him. I cannot describe what I have been feeling, he wrote to his wife. A kind of emptiness that hurts me dreadfully, a kind of longing that is never satisfied, that increases from day to day. It was in this state of mind that Mozart composed his last 3 symphonies. His music had always been brilliant and gay. Now it breathed a gentle sorrow, a resignation that had never been there before. the last year of his life, Mozart was approached by a man called Emanuel Schekaneder, who owned a little theater on the outskirts of Vienna. "Wolfgang, forget the emperor and his court. They will never do anything for you. Write an opera for me instead, and make it simple so that the common people may enjoy it." Mozart agreed, and based his opera on Schekaneder's libretto. Instead of using Italian, the language of the court opera, they wrote their opera in German so that the audience would understand. In this way was born the first great German opera, The Magic Flute. Shortly after, Mozart fell ill and was too weak to go to the theater. Every night he would look at the clock and follow the performance in his mind. Now they are playing the Overture. In a mood of despair, Mozart threw himself into his final task, a Mass for the Dead. The piece was commissioned by a count who loved music. But as Mozart wrote the work, he became convinced that he was composing the Requiem for his own death. To his friend Da Ponte he wrote, "I know from what I suffer that my hour has come. I have reached the end without having had the enjoyment of my talent. Life was so beautiful. My career began under such happy auspices. But no one can change his destiny. One must resign himself. It will be as Providence wills. I must close. Here is my death song. I must not leave it incomplete." He raced against time to finish the Requiem, conjuring out of his tired brain the magnificent picture of the day of wrath, when the strong and the weak, the sinners and the righteous will be summoned to judgment. Mozart's premonition came true. He did not live to finish the Requiem. The work was completed from his sketches by his pupil, Franz Sussmayer. Mozart died shortly before his 36th birthday. Because of his debts, he was given the poorest kind of funeral. Constanza was prostrate with grief. A violent storm was raging, so that his friends turned back at the city gates. Thus, with no one to do him honor, this prince of music was cast into a pauper's grave without even a tombstone to mark his resting place. But his monument is more enduring than marble or bronze, for the beauty of his music can never fade. Till the end of time, wherever men cherish the noble art of music, they will speak the name of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart with reverence and love.